is always a very hard act to follow. A lot of wisdom there, a lot more new data I haven't seen since last time I saw this. Okay, so that seems good. Sit down. Okay, so I'm going to talk about three things. I'll start with just a little bit of context for mobile health, what motivates us to be using it, a little bit about the evolutionary case. Then, since my talk is about how does mHealth, how do these interventions change behavior, that's mostly what I'll focus on. And then the last part, I'll talk about how to optimize the mHealth interventions that we do. Billy will go into this in more detail, but we've found that it's a lot of information, so giving you a first sort of a light overview touch, I think helps to make that clearer when she does her talk. So why did we get into using mobile health technology to begin with? Well, I'm a clinical health psychologist. Clinical psychologists are trained to do everything in a 50-minute therapy hour. So our go-to approach is you come to see me in my office, you sit and talk to me for 50 minutes, and we're done. If I were a physician, it would be 10 or 15 minutes. But that's our go-to approach. You've got to come in person, talk, and even if I'm a physician, we have to put everything in the electronic medical record. I can't look at you. So we have some issues there. So a lot of what drove many of us to start doing mobile health is is the idea of increasing population reach, that maybe people don't need to come to downtown Chicago to pay for parking on Michigan Avenue, which costs a fortune, or downtown Manhattan. You can overcome logistical barriers because they can be anywhere. You can be reaching them by the internet, through an app, by phone. They don't have to deal with childcare. So many of those burdens are overcome by using mobile health. Second point is what Ash calls, Ash from Kevin Volk's group, the problem of hovering over the X number, 25,000 hours, all the time that you're not spending sitting in front of your healthcare provider. You know, we like to think that we've got great impact over our clients when we talk to them for 15 minutes or 50 minutes. But the fact is, they spend the vast amount of their time away from us. So if we want them to be making improvements, we need some way to stay connected, and we also need them to be much more engaged in this problem than just listening to us tell them what to do. So mobile health in particular gives us that capability to stay connected to people, gives them the ability to stay connected to their devices, which we hope will be having them make healthy changes. Since the device can take on some of the burden, it lowers interventionist costs. Potentially, if something works, it means that we can leave something behind. We may have maintenance, we may have greater scalability. And then the last part is, as Donna was saying, the new potential that we now have, now that we have smart devices, which we never really had before. These devices, because we take them with us every place, know what's going on with us. They know our context, they know something about our state. So if we can capture and act on that information intelligently, it gives us the ability to give them in the moment support in their natural environment, which is something you could never do when you're waiting for them to come to you and see you once a week for 50 minutes. That's never when they need you. It's always when they're out in their natural environment. Okay, so technology. This is a space, unlike much of what we know in psychology and behavioral science, which evolved very, very slowly. Our fields, they may have felt to us like they were burgeoning along rapidly. It's nothing compared to what's now happened now that we have technology in here. So when I was in elementary school, this was one of my favorite TV shows. It was a show called Get Smart. And it was a comedy about this detective who was playing a little bit with sort of high-tech devices. He had this thing called a smart shoe. And it had a phone in it. Well, this this was at the time that phones were attached to the wall, or maybe they were on the table with dials that you had to run around with your finger. We thought this was just the most bizarre thing. We all wanted one, but we thought this will never in our lifetimes happen. Well, fast forward a few years, and you see the generation, you see how rapidly these new technologies have emerged. Now we have phones that are a whole lot smaller than GetSmart's shoe was. And we've seen the same thing in the evolution of smartwatches. This is an actual smartwatch that was developed by Seiko, the first one in 1980. Very attractive. And of course, now we have this. So in our lifetimes, in some of our lifetimes, we've seen this kind of evolution. Well, what's under the hood of all this, what allows it? I'm sure you're all familiar with this. Moore's Law. Moore was the co-founder of Intel and made this observation that has continued to hold true, that every 2 years, the number of transistors that you can fit on an integrated circuit has doubled. And it seems to be continuing. And with that doubling comes a doubling of processing speed, memories, and the number of sensors that you can get on an integrated circuit. So this kind of very rapid evolution has made it possible for us to make changes and also created a need for us to be able to learn fast, to take advantage of them. Having just completed a review of the 30 meta-analyses that exist of the behavior change techniques that were, 93 of them that were pointed out by Susan Mickey, I can tell you that 3 of them, and this covers 409,000 some odd people, 3 of them have got a vast literature. They are the most studied. I'm not going to show you the data because they're really demoralizing, but I can tell you with these, we know a lot about prompt goal setting, prompt self-monitoring, and provide performance feedback. And I would suggest to you that the vast majority of mobile health interventions that we have are based on those 3 behavior change techniques and on this theoretical model, which is not nearly as attractive as self-determination theory, but it is the most widely used in mobile health. It is control systems theory. It's the principle that governs how a thermometer works. To regulate the temperature in your home, there is a target, it's the goal. There's a sensing device that detects the current temperature. There's a mechanism that compares to say, are they aligned or not? And if they're not, there is a mechanism to bring them into alignment. And this is the model that we apply first to talk about self-regulation and behavior change. So this is a model obviously comes from physical systems, from things that don't have emotions as far as we know. It makes a whole lot of sense if we think about things like how you fix a flat tire. You see the current state. You've got a pretty clear sense of what the goal should look like, and you keep pumping air into it until it matches. This is what our major theories of human behavior change are based on. So how does it look when we apply this to a self-regulation problem, like trying to lose weight or regulate your diet? Well, that gets a little bit harder, and is part of the reason why we need these technology support systems to help us. Suppose your goal is to eat a 500-calorie lunch, and this is what's on your plate. Are they discrepant, or are they aligned? They're actually close. It depends on the condiments that you put on there, but that's not as easy as telling if the tire is still flat. So it helps to have some decision support to be able to look this up. And this is what the apps that have been built for diet self-regulation do. So here's one of the first apps that we built. Okay. So why don't we just give people apps to help them build their own control system and self-regulate? Will that do it? Well, this was part of our thought in the very first study that we did of mobile health obesity intervention. With a population, I think there are not major disparities in terms of poverty and ethnicity now, but where there is still a disparity has to do with older people. I think it's workable, but I think it still exists. So we started there. This was a study that we did with older veterans, about 60. None of them had ever used what was at that time the most cutting edge mobile health technology, the Palm Pilot. And these were folks who were getting treatment in the VA's obesity system. They were going to the MOVE groups, which are basic group healthy lifestyle, intensive lifestyle interventions, diet, physical activity, behavior change. And all that we varied was whether they were recording their diet and activity on paper and pencil, which is the traditional way to do it, or whether they were recording it on a Palm Pilot that had an early version of an app. And here are the results. Blue is the group that got the Palm Pilot with the app. Red is the group that was recording on paper and pencil. The solid line is those people who went to 80% of their treatment groups, their MOVE treatment groups. Dotted is those who went to less. What you see is that if people went to 80% of their treatment groups and they had the app, they lost about 15 pounds, which was pretty darn good. However, look at what happened if they had the app and they didn't go to those treatment groups. This is sort of the definition of engagement. I don't know why that is happening. Anyway, so these are folks who, they had the app, but they were showing with their feet that they were not actually engaged in the treatment. We don't actually know what they were doing on the app, but they didn't lose any weight. In fact, they gained a slight amount of weight. So what you see from this is that it's not the tech that's doing the magic. It's not the device, not the widget. If it sits in a drawer someplace, it doesn't do anything. But if somebody is engaged in using it, then it gives the person a leg up. These poor people who went to 80% of their groups and recorded on paper and pencil didn't lose anyway, but those who had this more engaging technology did. Okay, so now what you see here is 4 generations of the diabetes prevention program on an app. In the diabetes prevention program, which is probably our best validated intensive lifestyle intervention for weight loss, people are asked to track their calorie intake, their fat intake, and their moderate vigorous physical activity. And then to make adjustments that will shift their energy balance so that they're in energy deficit. Here is here's the app that we were using with that first study. You see, we have people, they have their goal thermometers for saturated fat, for physical activity. At that point, we had no ability to detect from an accelerometer and to get this information onto the app, so they had to self-report their activity, which we knew was wrong, but we didn't have the technology to do anything else. Move along, next generation, we shifted to Androids. Now you see we have the full calorie feedback, fat feedback, and physical activity feedback, got color-coded information about how they're doing. And now we have the first accelerometer that can Bluetooth to a smartphone. It wasn't the greatest, it would run out of battery, you'd have to poke it with a paper clip to get it restarted. It wasn't not the best, but it did something. Here, we're over to iPhone as well. Now we have Fitbits that Bluetooth easily. They're not getting moderate vigorous physical activity, but they're getting steps. And we have Wi-Fi scales that can Bluetooth that information. And now we move along and we have fancier, more current imagery that people are more familiar with, and we have fancier sensors. And in each case, people are either meeting with a treatment group or they're getting coached over the phone. So the question for you is, do you think these are all the same intervention or different interventions? All different? Okay. Anybody think they're the same? You think they're the same? Let's see hands on how many think it's the same. Okay. many think it's different? Okay, equally divided, true to form. This group is always divided down the middle. I like that. I would suggest that they are more the same than different, but I can see different points of view about this. I would suggest that they're more the same than different because they're using the same behavior change techniques. In each case, there's a goal. They're self-monitoring, you're entering your food or you're tracking your activity. There's decision support, you can look up what the calories are in the food. You're getting feedback in terms of the colors, the circles. Sometimes we use incentives. And in every case, there is what you're getting from the coach, which is a combination of social support and accountability, because you know somebody's going to be checking on what you're doing. So I would suggest they are more the same than different. And so I think this is something that is reassuring to those of us who are clinicians or behavioral scientists working in this area, which is that, yeah, the tech is changing very rapidly, but it's not the widget alone that's doing the work. It's the widget that is the bearer of these behavior change principles. And they pretty much stay the same or evolve very, very slowly. Now, we won't talk about the meta-analysis about how well they work. But let's talk about how we could do better and how we can optimize the interventions that we develop. And I think the reason that this is really important has to do with where Vivek started off. And we actually have been in this situation for longer than you might think. We are broke. Our healthcare system is really in tough financial shape. And actually, some of this problem was described very well by Archibald Cochrane, who is the person that many of you will know as the person that the Cochrane Collaboration, the database of systematic evidence reviews, is named after. In 1972, he wrote this really wonderful, it's a beautifully written book called Effectiveness and Efficiency, Random Reflections on Health Services. And he makes these 4 points. The first is that the demand for treatment will always outstrip available resources. And he's actually not the first person to make that point. William Osler, in 1872, I believe it is, at Johns Hopkins, has this wonderful quote that he gave at a commencement address, and it is that the most important feature that differentiates humans from other animals is the desire to take medicine. Where this appetite came from and how far it will evolve is a problem for psychology. But it's true. We think more is better, and so demand outstrips available resources. So the thing that Cochrane is most known for is making the case that we shouldn't be spending on treatments that don't have an evidence base that they work. That's what he's most known for. But this other point is the point that I think has even greater relevance for us today, and it's that our health policy should maximize the efficiency with which the care system uses its human and financial assets. We can't just spend infinite amounts of money for everything because we can't afford it. And this last point, people should be given the care that they need, not less, but also not more. Because the bottom line is, there are going to be some people who need more, and some people who can get away with less. And by giving people what they need, it's how we're going to be able to afford the care for those that need more. So how do we do that? There is this very exciting suite of methods that were developed to help most, the multi-phase optimization strategy. It was largely developed by Linda Collins, Susan Murphy, Billy Namshaney, Danny Almirall. And the one important thing to know is many people think that MOST refers to only one design, the factorial experiment. It actually is a suite of methods that were developed to solve this problem of using resources efficiently to maximize health. There are 3 different techniques that I'll talk about that address different problems. And basically, they are to tell us how we take the multiple things that we throw into the kitchen sink of most behavioral interventions and how to sort of pare them down so that we are using what works for how much so that we can begin delivering cost-efficient care. I'm going to talk about this on the next slide because this is a little bit easier to read. The most factorial experiment is the one that is the best known, and it addresses the question of what is the best optimized average intervention to maximize the intervention impact at the least resource consumption. If you think about evidence-based medicine, evidence-based practice, this is what it's been all about. If you have a client come into your office and you want to know what is the treatment that is most likely to work and they're most likely to respond to, it's based on an average pool of evidence from randomized controlled trials. And so you are picking the thing that is most likely to work. It has the strongest evidence base. If you're a psychologist, you would call this an EST, an empirically supported treatment. But how many of you treat average patients? None of us. There's people differ. They're quite heterogeneous. And so SMART is a design that exists to tackle that heterogeneity, to address differences in what people respond to. It would be great if we had precision medicine and we knew the answer to this already, so we would know who needs what right from the outset, but we don't. And until we've got that exhaustive database, smart designs, stepped care designs are probably the way we're going to need to go. And these address questions like, where should I start? What should be my treatment sequence? How long should I wait to know if it's working? And what should I do next if it's not working? This, if you think about evidence-based practice, we often tend to reduce it to the single model of what's the best evidence-based practice, but actually it's a process. It's actually graphed as a circle where you start with your best guess, your best evidence-based practice. But if it doesn't work, you don't keep doing it, you try something else. And so this part of the process is called analyze and adjust. That's what SMART deals with. JEDIs are the ones we could never do before we had smart technology. These are the ones that deal with things like what Donna was talking about with chocolate craving and her friend with the chocolate, who's the cue to eating chocolate, shows up. These deal with the fact that we know that we're not the same person all day long. We go in and out of different states, states where we're more at risk for doing something health injurious, states where we're more or less receptive to being intervened upon. And these designs are able to use the continuous digital data that we get to try to figure out how to act in real time to keep us out of harm's way. Okay. I'm going to just give you some examples of some trials that are in various stages of completion, illustrating these three designs. The most factorial is a trial that I did with Linda Collins. It's called the opt-in trial. It's a weight loss study. And here, what we're trying to do is to address what components in an intervention have maximal effect for minimal cost. Our conceptual model, and I'm using model like Donna would probably use theory, this is not a mathematical model, but we basically are using a social cognitive approach, and we think there's two domains of things that people need in order to be able to self-regulate their weight. One set of them is intra-individual things, sort of skills, self-confidence, that sort of stuff, and the other is they need help dealing with the toxic environment because our environment doesn't make this very easy. So the other components are tackling making the environment more friendly. A concept called facilitation, which, for example, you could think of meal replacements in weight loss treatment, where if the problem is knowing what portion size to choose, these things take that work out of it for you. These are prepackaged foods like Jenny Craig or Nutrisys or something like that. Supportive accountability, here we're thinking about what sort of social support do you have and who will keep you accountable to staying on the diet. So we've got components tackling show you what I mean. So here are our components, and you can see that there's 5 of them. And that what we're going to do in this study is we're going to turn to a minimal level or turn on and off the ones that deal with either the sort of intra-individual things, so like the coaching and the text messaging, we think those build skills and motivation, and the things that, that make the environment more manageable, the recommendations to use meal replacement, or we actually have a condition where we are enrolling everybody with their weight loss support buddies, but we assume that some buddies are really good and know how to be supportive, and others not so good. So we vary whether we train the buddies to be supportive. Okay, so at the end of the day, what we're going to emerge with is an estimate of which of these components contribute the most to weight loss and for how much money. And we're going to build a package. Yeah.
Can I just ask, because it's like hard for me to get my head around
Yeah.
the number of people in
Yeah.
groups.
Yes.
And like power to detect
I'll
differences.
go to that in a second, but the reassurance for the moment is mostly we're looking at main effects. Okay, which these are very powerful designs because of that. Okay, so that we're going to emerge with these main effects, and we're going to apply what we know to build an intervention strategy that has only active components, and we're going to be a little bit liberal about these. They don't need to be 0.01. And we want the total intervention package to cost less than $500 because insurance will pay for that. So this will be a systematically built, evidence-based package that's cost efficient. So here's the design issue. Coaching sessions, they're getting either 12 or 24. And what you see is that half of the people in the study are getting 12 and half are getting 24. Sending the report to the primary care provider, half are getting no report, half are getting the report sent. Texts, half not getting them, half getting them. Now, what you're concerned about is there enough power to detect the interactions, the number in those small cells? We're not looking at that for our main outcome. We're looking at the main effects of the components. You'll see it gets a little bit slipperier when we get to the decision-making phase of things. But for the screening phase, which is what this is, we just want to know which components do the heavy lifting and how much do they cost. So we finished this trial, 562 people, retention, 84% at 6 months. Not bad considering we never see these people for treatment. This is entirely delivered by phone, and they're using their apps, and the coaches are getting their app feedback. The amount of weight loss, we get about 11 pounds at 6 months, which is more than 5% weight loss, so it's got a public health significance, which is what you would want for an intervention that costs this little. Okay, now place your bets on, and I know some of you know the answer to this, place your bets on which of these components do you think significantly bumped up the amount of weight loss? Which component do you think is the most expensive?
Coaching.
Meal replacement, it's a reasonable answer, but I didn't tell you something very important. Usually in meal replacement, what you would do, like what they did in Look Ahead, is you would provide everybody with all their food. We didn't think that was scalable for a public health approach. So we just gave people a week of meal replacement, and then we gave them recommendations to use it. So meal replacement was actually not that expensive. Coaching is the expensive one because basically you're paying for the trained personnel, and you're paying for them to either do 24 sessions or 12 sessions. So it's going to cost twice as much for 24 sessions. Okay, so now let's see who was right. In the only component that produced a significant increment in weight loss was buddy training. For all of the others, even though they're more intensive and more expensive, they're going in the wrong direction, not significantly, but they're going in the wrong direction. So, quite interesting. So when I first looked at this, I thought, oh no, this is a failed trial. They didn't engage. So they probably only called in for 2 sessions and that was the end of it, but it's not the case. The 24-call condition completed about twice as many calls as the 12-call condition. They got 100 more minutes. Their calls were slightly shorter by a couple of minutes, but that's not an awful lot. So they received the intervention that we delivered. And thank heavens we have these data, so I know that, or I would have just figured this is the type 2 error, we didn't implement the intervention. So how do we now take what we learned into the real world? And I'm going to suggest that this is another place where context really matters. So if I were simply applying the results from our main effects, I would say, okay, this is the condition I'm going to use because buddy training is the only one that has a significant effect, so it's worth paying more money for. For everything else, I leave it either off or set to the minimal level because why would I pay more for something that doesn't do any work? And that's pretty good. It gives you almost 5 kilograms weight loss, costs less than $500, and it gives you a value of that $85.4 dollars per kilogram lost. But I have other options here that are worth considering. If I'm at Northwestern and every pound counts and I've got a clientele that can afford it, I would probably look at this one, where here I can pick up another kilo for only another $10. And it gives me a better value by just adding the primary care report. What I think is happening is that people are acquiring all the skills and knowledge they need in the 12 sessions of coaching. And the remaining variance we can tap into is that what has to do with making the environment a little bit more friendly to weight loss. But if I were running a federally qualified health center and I had almost no money, this is the one I would look at. Where here, I don't even need to mess with buddy training. I just go with my 12 sessions of coaching and I get almost as good an amount of weight loss. And look at the price tag. Now it's only $324 and it's the best value. So when we have a science where we're engineering our mobile health interventions like this, we have the ability to make rational decisions about the use of resources, I think. Okay. SMART. So this is the one, you remember, that deals with, sorry. Oh, okay. How do I make it go back? Okay. This is the one that deals with differences in, individual differences in treatment response. So this is from a trial that I'm actually about 3/4 of the way through with Billy Numshade, who will do the lecture on this for you tomorrow. And this is a stepped care approach to weight loss. And the reason that this is interesting scientifically is that although stepped care is an accepted treatment approach for many conditions, many mental health, substance abuse conditions, it does not have a good track record in obesity treatment. It has basically not even matched standard treatment. And I think that's because we've waited too long. We thought you needed to wait 3 months to know if the treatment was working. We know from our preliminary data that we can tell within 2 weeks whether how somebody is going to do at 6 months. We get no additional information after that. Basically, if they're losing a half a pound a week, they're going to be fine. And so that's what we track. So the questions that we are asking here are, we're trying to figure out what is the optimal first-line treatment for a population of overweight and obese people. Notice that in the most trial, what I'm looking at is an ACT plus coaching. But here I'm trying to see if I can go even lower. I'm trying to say, okay, in the entire population, maybe there are some people that don't even need 12 sessions of coaching. Maybe there are some people that can do fine with just an app. So our hypothesis is that at 6 months of weight loss, those who receive the app alone as a first-line treatment will be non-inferior, they won't be any worse than those who start with the app plus coaching. Then the next question that we ask with this design is, okay, once we see that something isn't working, how much should we step up? Should we step up a little bit by just adding an inexpensive mobile health component? Or should we step up more expensively by adding a traditional weight loss component, like coaching if they haven't had it, meal replacement if they've already had coaching? Here's the design. We start with the first randomization. If they're doing fine, we just continue with them, they stay on. If they're responding to app, we just keep going with that. Responding to app plus coaching, we keep going with that. And what we re-randomize to is those who are not responding, whether we step them up modestly or we step them up a big amount. Okay. So we're not done with this one yet, but the takeaways are, in an adaptive design like a SMART, you're not developing a treatment package, you're developing an algorithm, a series of steps, and if then, where do you start, what do you do if it doesn't work? How long do you wait? It mimics what clinicians do in the real world, because if a treatment isn't working, you don't keep giving that same treatment. What's being adapted to is treatment non-response, and so far, I think this may turn out to be another very good news story. We're 3/4 of the way through. Only a little bit more than half of the people are being re-randomized, which means that whatever they're starting with, somehow this seems to be working for them. So we'll see when we finish, but could be another good news. Last one, the micro-randomized trial. Santosh Kumar is the principal investigator for this one. A large team of people from Northwestern and from University of Michigan. And this one is looking at the problem of trying to prevent relapse to smoking among people who have recently quit. Clinically, we know quitting smoking is really hard. And we also know that the time of greatest risk for somebody who's recently quit is in the first couple of weeks after. And what tends to happen is they'll try to test themselves, and once they've had one puff, they're dead. The odds are excellent that they're going to go back. We try and get them to call us rather than smoke. They don't. We give them assignments to page us. It doesn't work. They don't do it. So what this study is trying to do is to take advantage of the fact that we know one of the things that predicts relapse is stress. And we've got something we can do about stress. We have all these relaxation acts that people can do. So could we get people to use them if we prompt them? But when should we prompt them? You might think that, after all, when somebody's getting stressed, don't you want to open your app to make them relax like that? There's really two possibilities, and we don't know the answer. This is what this study is testing. It could be that stress is important because it's a state of risk. They're at risk for smoking, so that's the right time. But on the other hand, it could be a terrible time of state of responsivity to treatment because we're not usually in our best mental state when we're in real stress. You don't want to ask me to do something more when I'm beat out and very stressed. So, and we don't know which one of these is true. So we're doing a trial to figure it out. What this trial is doing is it's trying to figure out the decision rule for when should we prompt them to relax. Should it be when they're stressed because that's best? Should it be when they're not stressed because that's best? Does it not matter? In which case, the stress is not a tailoring variable in the micro-randomized trial language. How is this happening? It's happening by having people wear these sensors, wrist sensors, and a chest strap that is picking up ECG and respiration. The data are being processed on the phone in real time, and stress is being detected. How do we know what stress looks like? We know because Santosh did laboratory studies in which he had people do classic stress induction procedures, stick their arm in a bucket of ice water, do public speaking, do backwards mental arithmetic, looked at what the physiology was, developed machine learning algorithms that can detect it. And so what happens is, that's what triggers the opening of the app. Now, if you think about this in terms of randomized controlled trial language, how is this a micro-randomized trial? I mean, after all, we're not putting some people in the relaxation group and other people in the not relaxation group. What's getting randomized? Minutes are getting randomized. So what is going on is that minutes are being assigned to stress, non-stress, or a bunch of ignorable conditions. So it's a very sophisticated algorithm. This is Susan Murphy's and Billy's. You don't randomize the minutes that are unavailable. Either you can't tell because the data quality are so poor, and there's an awful lot of those, or you're not sure what's going on because they're physically active, and we can't tell the difference between that and stress. Or they're driving, you don't want to ask them to do, you don't want to be sued, so you can't ask them to do something while they're driving. Or it's been less than 60 minutes since the last time they got an EMA. So that's burden. So the long and the short of that is that these micro-randomization probabilities are set so that people are getting 3 relaxation prompt interventions per day, 3rd in the morning, 3rd in the afternoon, 3rd in the evening, and they vary. Roughly half in stress and non-stress. How do we know what's working? Here we're doing intensive longitudinal analyses. We're looking at proximal outcomes. A stress intervention is well timed if it lengthens the time to the next stress episode and lengthens the time to the next smoking episode, compared to a rolling time stress intervention or no stress intervention. So that's what this design will do. The other important thing is we're not done when we're done with the micro-randomized trial. We've developed the algorithm, and that's a key point about all of these most designs. You're not done when you've optimized the intervention. You still need to know if it works compared to a control condition. So you still need to do a randomized control trial, either of the optimized package or of the optimized algorithm. Okay, so takeaways. These technology-supported interventions are really cool. They help to expand the reach, reduce the burden, and refine the tailoring of our behavioral interventions. It's not the widget, at least at present, that's doing the work. Maybe things will change when we have adequate artificial intelligence, but at the moment, it's hybrids, it's human in the loop with the smart technology that's doing the work. These new research designs can help us optimize these interventions efficiently and systematically. The most factorial can get us the most efficient and effective intervention package for the average person, but because none of us treat average people, the step care decision rules help us address those differences between people by answering questions like, what should we try first? How long should we wait to see if it's working? What should we try next? And the other one, which is really cool, and I only know one study that's doing this, how should we wean people off of treatment? Last one, the JEDI's tailoring rules that specify when and how to address within-person changing states of risk and receptivity to interventions. That's what JEDI's do, but don't do one before doing the micro-randomized trial to check your assumptions about when it's right to intervene. And I am one of these people who puts my thanks at the end. And so I have to thank both my funders and my wonderful lab team, Billy, who you'll meet, Susan Murphy, Linda Collins, and then my colleagues at Northwestern, June Robinson, Frank Pinedo, John Rogers, and Mike Wolf. Thank you very much.